right, and we are live. Welcome to Monday Meets here at the Willow. I'm Will Abro, and with me today is Jessica Granger, our prevention specialist, and Kerrie Lonard from Kansas Legal Services. Hi, welcome everybody. Welcome.
Thank you.
We're going to talk a little bit about the eviction moratorium, and I'll leave it to Kerrie to kind of give us some more details of that. But I did want to let everybody know that if you need immediate assistance, you can go ahead and contact us on our 24-hour hotline, 785-843-3333. If you have questions throughout the presentation and you're watching it on Facebook Live, feel free to leave those in the comments. I will be keeping an eye on those, and I'll be trying to get those into the conversation as we go through. If you have a question that you don't feel comfortable asking in person, or you would like to ask anonymously, you can email me, and I'll put my email address there in the comments field as well, and you can send that along and I'll ask it for you. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and get started. So Kerrie, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, we really appreciate it. We had you a few weeks back for an all-staff meeting, and it was a great conversation about Kansas Legal Services. You know, so let's start with a little bit about that. Like, can you give us your title and talk about Kansas Legal Services, what you do, who you are, and how we work together?
Okay. So I am Kerrie Lonard, and I'm the managing attorney of Kansas Legal Services Topeka office. So we have 11 field offices across the state. So Kansas Legal Services essentially serves every county here in Kansas, and we have like I said, 11 field offices. So my office in Topeka serves several counties in this area, which include Lindsay, Jefferson, Osage, Shawnee County, and then Douglas County. And we work very closely with the Willow and other community providers in working with our clients. So we are a nonprofit law firm. So a lot of people think that we're a state agency, but we're not. We're just like any other law firm, but we're nonprofit. And our goal is essentially to provide equal access to justice for the most vulnerable Kansans. And we are providing the civil side of legal services. So if you are dealing with a criminal action, then you may be afforded a criminal court appointed attorney. And we're essentially then serving individuals who may not be able to afford legal services on the civil side of things. And so if you think about any civil type of action, we may be providing assistance with that. We do a lot of consumer work, housing, disability work, and then a lot of individuals that we're working with are victim survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault, and that's where we were working closely with the Willow. And that may include working with protection orders, dealing with divorce and custody cases, trying to establish some child support issues, but also working with someone holistically and trying to make sure that is there a civil legal barrier for this individual to be able to really move forward and in their lives and find some stability and some safety. And so that's where we're trying to provide those services. So evictions is a big thing right now, as we know, and a big topic. And that was, I think during your staff meeting, we had quite a few questions as individuals are dealing with housing issues right now.
Yeah, I think many of our advocates are working with clients who may be in mental situations where the expiration of the moratorium is going to create some issues. So I was hoping today that we could kind of talk through sort of what the moratorium means for both renters and home buyers, what rights they have in the situation, and what they may need to be looking out for that they may not know. Desmond, do you want to ask the next question?
Well, so what exactly is the state of eviction legislation in Kansas now? And with regards to the moratorium, and how does that affect renters?
Okay, so right now in Kansas, and it's in line with the CDC moratorium, which extends essentially a moratorium on evictions as it relates to COVID-related hardships for non-payment of rent. And that's been extended to the end of the month, which is March 31st, so just around the corner.
Okay.
There is some rumor out there that at least the CDC moratorium might be extended. So I think it's something that everyone should keep a close eye on to see if that happens or not. But right now, the end is coming at the end of the month, March 31st. So in the meantime, essentially the moratoriums have provided at least some a safety net for individuals who, as I said, were renters who are experiencing a financial hardship related to COVID, and for non-payment of rent. And I say those things very specifically because that doesn't mean that someone could not be evicted for a different reason. And we are seeing that happen. So it may be that they have non-payment of rent, but maybe there's another issue that their landlord has been able to cite in order to move forward with an eviction. And we are hearing from people that landlords are successful in doing so because they're saying, hey, yeah, they may not be paying rent, but that's not why we're evicting this individual. It's because of other violation that we've been able to cite and prove with the court. So a couple of things to think about with the moratoriums. Number one, if individuals have not done so already, you still have, a week and a half to 2 weeks to complete the CDC affidavit, which you can find a link either on the CDC website or our website, or even I think several of the courts have a link as well. Make sure and you provide that to your landlord. And then at least, and you have to, it's an affidavit. So you're swearing that you meet all of the requirements. And again, it should buy you some time. Again, that timeline's, getting short, but one of the other things that I would encourage people to do is that there is a new program that has just come down with some additional money here in Kansas called the Kansas Emergency Rental Assistance. So people may have heard of the KEP program, which was released about, I think, October, November, and ended in December. And it required individuals to work with a landlord to apply for additional monies that would cover back rent and potentially future rent if it was COVID related. And that ended in December. Well, now there's a new batch of money that's come through this Kansas Emergency Rental Assistance. Very similar requirements in regards to, you would have to be a tenant who rents their home, and you have to, the tenant's 2020 household income should not exceed 80% of the area's median income. So that's going to require some math, but I think if once you go on the application and fill that out, it's going to do that for you. At least one member of the tenant household has to be experiencing a documented financial hardship as a result of COVID. And at least one member of the household would have to say that they're uncertain where they would stay and potentially be homeless if an eviction were to occur. And they would have to have some type of valid proof of identification. So that may be a barrier for some individuals in applying for this resource. The assistance would cover up to 12 months of residential rent in arrears and up to 3 months of prospective rent. So essentially, this is going to look back and say, it's going to look at rent that you owe and potentially prospective rent if you know that you're not going to be able to cover future rent. It does require that the landlord complete an online certification as well as the tenant. So it's really benefiting both the landlord and the tenant because the landlord's going to get paid, which is what they're wanting, and the tenant is going to be able to really catch up, which is one of the biggest concerns that we all have in regards to the moratorium, because although a person cannot be evicted because of COVID financial hardship, if they haven't been paying rent this whole time, once that moratorium is lifted, they still owe all of that money. That's not forgiven. So if you haven't paid 3 months of rent, you're still going to owe that 3 months of rent plus any late fees that the landlord can attach to it. So this is a great resource if people qualify, and I would encourage people to apply for this resource as soon as possible. And they can do that by going to the Kansas Housing Resources Corporation website.
So this would, you would be eligible for this if you had documented evidence that you were affected negatively financially by COVID. Doesn't mean you don't
Financially.
have to actually have COVID. Is that what that
Exactly.
means?
Exactly. Yeah. So we have, we have people who they were having to work less hours because they were having to take care of children because children were doing at home school, or a hybrid, or hours were reduced. They give some examples. So include loss of employment, reduction of household income, significant related expenses that were due to COVID. So if you did have some increased medical bills, or childcare costs, or even equipment or internet costs could be considered, as long as you can document all of those financial hardships related to COVID. So I think it's thinking outside the box of financially, where am I at, and are any of these burdens that I'm experiencing, would those have been there but for COVID?
Kerrie, I want to make sure that I can give people the access to the resources as we move forward. Can I just verify that that's the Kansas Housing Resources, is it Resources Commission or
Corporation?
Corporation, okay.
Yeah.
Great, I'll make sure to get that in the notes as well. And is that a process then? I love Desmond's question about making sure people, you don't necessarily have to have had COVID, it can be hardships related to COVID. Is that a process that the tenant and landlord can do without an attorney, that they can apply for together?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So that's something that doesn't necessarily require any legal advice or assistance.
No, just completing the application and making sure that they're working essentially in tandem, because it's going to require a number, an identification number. So the landlord is going to have to complete an application as well.
Okay, great. Well, that's a fantastic resource for folks to know about, which kind of actually segs into the next question we were going to talk about is, this is such a kind of a new world we're in, that I don't think there may be questions that we don't necessarily know that we should be asking.
Yeah.
And so I'd kind of like to talk over that. Are there any other benefits or rights or assistance programs that people might not know they have access to, or are there any responsibilities or things that they should be documenting or keeping track of that they might not know?
Well, I think so. We covered a couple of those. So one would just be documenting any expenses that are related to COVID that have been creating a hardship for your family, your household. The second thing is really, I think, communicating with your landlord early on. I think that, there's definitely going to be those landlords and relationships where I'm not sure that any communication is really going to get you where you need to go. But for the most part, landlords are trying to make a living as well. And, they're wanting to figure out, how can I make my rent? So making sure that you communicate early on if you're experiencing a hardship, making sure that you're completing that CBC form if you can, and then trying to work out with your landlord what options might be available, whether it's trying to complete this application for the KIRA financial assistance program, or whether it's trying to work out with your landlord the ability to at least catch up on your payments in some way. Because again, I think if you're showing a good faith effort to try to catch up, in the long run, it's going to benefit both you and the landlord if you're able to stay and continue to pay your rent. I think the biggest issue is, if you are going to negotiate anything with your landlord, get it in writing and make sure that whatever agreement that you reach, that you're both on the same page. We do find a lot of times that people work out negotiated agreements and there's documentation of those agreements. And then if there's some type of conflict in the future, it's very difficult then to show that there was any sort of agreement outside of the lease. So you want to make sure that you get anything done in writing.
Would emails and text messages be able to count towards like an agreement made in writing?
Potentially, as long as they're, they show who the emails are from, and that's the appropriate date, and you have the original version, and it's a complete and accurate representation of the communication.
I just want to remind everybody at this point that we are here with Kerrie Lonard from Kansas Legal Services, talking about the eviction moratorium, which expires on March 31st. If you have questions about any aspect of this and you're watching it on Facebook Live, you can feel free to send us a message. I've been trying to kind of write down some resources and links as we've been going through, Kerrie, so people can have access to some of that information, because I think there's some great stuff here. If you've got any questions and you don't feel comfortable asking them personally, or you would prefer to ask them anonymously, you can also feel free to email me at waverell@willowdvcenter.org, and that is in the comments as well. But do feel free to kind of let us know if you have any questions. We're here to kind of, for the next sort of 30 minutes or so, kind of talk about the moratorium and how what effects it is going to have when it expires. I just look here and see where.
Have you I have a question I just kind of thought of. Have you, or has Kansas Legal Services noticed any changes in how survivors of domestic violence and human trafficking have been, how their housing issues have been affected by COVID?
We've had kind of a mixed bag, I think, of responses and from different parts of the state and what our office serves. We've had a couple instances where a survivor had filed for a protection order, and there had been some expressed reluctance by the courts and law enforcement to remove the perpetrator from the home, because there was some questions about what this moratorium meant and whether you can remove someone from the home, and then where would this person go and what's going to happen. And I think those have resolved themselves, but that was definitely something that we had heard, so which creates obviously some significant safety issues and concerns for people. I think capacity, just that we've experienced when people were trying to leave a situation. I know that whether it was Willow or some of the other support agencies, I think capacity issues was a difficult thing, just because of the required social distancing and that sort of thing. It created issues for people, and I think that we have had individuals who shared that, you know, they didn't leave the situation because they weren't quite sure where they could go and what their options were. And so I think it's created some challenges there. As you, well, when you were mentioning some just resources, so I'll just kind of keep talking unless you guys have another question. I just want to a couple things. So on our website at Kansas Legal Services, which is all spelled out, .org, there's a number of different resources available for landlord, tenant, and housing questions for people. And I would encourage people to go to our website and peruse around if they have a particular question. It's probably not the first time it's been asked, and so there may be an answer there. HCCI is another wonderful resource for individuals who are dealing with housing and consumer issues. They provide a lot of support services. There's also a Lawrence Tenants Rights Group that I think not everyone is aware of, and they can be a good resource for individuals as well.
Are there any things? I mean, we've talked a little bit around it, but I just want to kind of directly address it. Are there any things that renters should be aware of about the actual, like, the logistics of the eviction process in relation to COVID, specifically the eviction process, that they might not be aware of regarding any changes regarding the COVID executive order?
So as far as the process itself, I mean, the eviction process can get started. They just aren't able to complete the eviction if it's COVID related financial hardship. So I think what we're seeing in some areas is that landlords and attorneys are still filing for the eviction itself, and it may just get delayed then or set out. And then they're waiting to see what happens with it. We have had some landlords and attorneys file it, and then if someone responds, answers, and provides like the CDC affidavit or some type of documentation that's COVID-related, then they're agreeing to dismiss it. I think what's happening is we do have people out there who are just not responding. So they think they're under the safety net of this moratorium, there's eviction, and until they can show that it's COVID related, they just assume maybe people think it is, or that there's a safety net, and they're not answering or responding, and they're getting a default eviction against them. And so that's created some issues, because we've had a lot of people call us after the evictions happened, and that makes it very difficult to then stop or do anything as far as the process is concerned. So we strongly encourage people to speak with their landlords early on, document everything, all communications. If you are receive a petition and you're served with paperwork, don't ignore it. Contact community resources or Kansas Legal Services for some help or guidance, or an attorney out there who also may have some housing expertise, and answer it and don't ignore it. That's one of the biggest things.
And in terms of accessing assistance through Kansas Legal Services, I know that we refer people over to you regularly. I'm not as sure about what other angles people can kind of come into the Kansas Legal Services process. So could you maybe talk through that?
Sure. So we have essentially 3 primary ways that people apply for services. So the first one is by calling. We have what we call our 1-800 central intake application line. And that 1-800 number is on our website, and it's 1-800-723-6953. And they complete a phone application. They'll gather all of their information, what their legal issue is, and then if then they send that intake or application to the appropriate field office. So if it's a Lawrence resident in case, then it's going to come to our office. And then we will follow up with that individual. The second way to apply for services is to complete an application online at our website. They'll fill out all the information. One thing to remember about that process is it does require a follow-up phone call with our central intake staff before it's exported to the field office. So that's part of it. It does require that next step, and sometimes people don't realize that, and so they contact our office and say, "Hey, I have an application for services." And it just got stalled because they didn't have the opportunity to complete that follow-up phone call. And then third way, which Will is what you had mentioned, which is essentially what we call a paper application or direct referral from one of our community partners. And that's just a paper application that they complete, and then they email or scan it or fax it over to our office.
Great. I do have one question in from one of our advocates, actually. Just in terms of, we're talking a little bit about what clients themselves can do when looking at planning for the moratorium to expire, if it does, because I know that you said that there's the possibility that could be extended, at least by the CDC, whether or not that extends.
There's rumors out there, yeah, we'll see.
Right. What steps can the advocate, what steps can they take when working with clients to kind of prepare people for that? Is it kind of a similar process to what individuals are going to prepare? Or is there anything that advocates can be doing on behalf of clients to sort of help them get through this time?
Well, I think number one, like I said, is seeing if they can't qualify for that KIRA assistance program, because I think that's just going to benefit everybody all around. Otherwise, I think that really it's going to be having plan A, B, and C in line of, if you have back rent and you haven't been paying it, but you haven't been evicted, then I think people need to be prepared to be receiving that eviction and notice. And I have a feeling it's, we're going to have a lot of those happening because, like I said, landlords are they're needing their lease obligations fulfilled as well for their own financial obligations. And, if you're able to pay and work it out with your landlord, I think that communication earlier on, the better. But otherwise, I think people need to have plan A, B, and C, which is be ready to receive that petition for an eviction, be ready to be able to either plead with your landlord and whoever their representative is, that hopefully you have a plan of how you can catch up on that rent. Because again, remember, you still owe that rent and any fees that may be associated with it. And so that's going to be the concern for people, is if they're 6 months behind, are they really going to be able to catch up? And if not, then, arguably, it's going to be difficult to challenge that eviction when it comes down once the moratorium is lifted.
I think too, something that from our perspective that I'm picking up is that because the efforts are kind of filtering down from the federal to the state to the county level, there's the potential for more resources coming up, but we don't exactly know what those are right now. So I guess I would add from our perspective that, just kind of keep reaching out to resources, even if they maybe don't necessarily have something today that may be coming down the pipeline, that may be something that may be available later on.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of different programs, I think, that are coming down, just like the Kerrie program. I think, like you said, there's a lot of monies potentially from the feds down to the state and down to the communities. And I know that Douglas County has been trying to look at the housing issue very closely. And, we know that we already have a large population who are dealing with homelessness in our county. And I know that our community does not want to see that be inflated due to the inability to pay their rent once the moratorium is lifted. So I hope that as a community, we can pull together and figure out ways to keep people in their housing. I think we're going to have quite the crisis on our hands.
Well, that is all the questions that have come in through me. Desmond, do you have anything else to kind of follow up?
That's all I got.
All right. Well, we do like to always end because it's kind of an informal Monday afternoon chat with a shout out section. So if you'd like to, if there's anybody, coworkers, friends, pets, partners, things that you're doing, things you enjoy that you'd like to shout out, let us know a little something about yourself. That would be great. So this is your time.
Oh gosh. Well, I'll shout out to my awesome staff. They've been working hard through all of this, and I think everybody here has been really trying to do what we can in regards to gearing up to provide support services for individuals, particularly as we anticipate the housing needs are going to increase. So shout out to all of our Kansas Legal Services staff and our attorneys here. And thank you guys over at the Willow.
Thank you so much. It really has been appreciated. I think this is one of those things that'll continue to be helpful as a resource for folks. We will post this on our YouTube page, and I'll make sure to send you the link, and you can add it to the KLS list of resources if you want, or just have it handy. But thank you for your time. Really do appreciate it. I'll direct people to those resources that we mentioned, and I think just one more time, just repeat those kind of key points of. Be sure to speak with your landlord early, document everything, and don't ignore served papers. Kind of am I getting those right? Are those kind of the big three on your to-do list?
Those are the big three, yeah.
All right, great. Well, if you have any other questions or need any more information or assistance or referrals, please contact us at 785-843-3333, which is our 24-hour hotline. You can check out our website at willowdbcenter.org or Kansas Legal Services at, Kerrie, I'm going to let you do this one.
Oh, kansaslegalservices.org. So .org.
All right, excellent, great. And we really appreciate your time, Kerrie. Thank you so much. We'll see everybody next week.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.